Miro Polo Sweep Out the Broom Boom Countdown. A spoofing. Episode 9. Meeting Old Friends. Shit! I just had a close encounter of the third kind. Why third kind? I don't know. What's what people say sometimes, right? No, the clever ones among you will now say. The term close encounter of the third kind goes back to the astronomer Joseph Allen Hynek, who lived in the USA in the 20th century. He developed a classification of UFO encounters and defined 4 levels, for which there are even official short names, CA1 to CA4. So-called psychological cases, i.e. presumably experienced cases, were classified under CE3, close encounter of the third kind. My CE3 was definedly experienced, just now, and I'm still totally confused. I'll report in detail in a moment, but first, as always, a short summary of what was happened so far. It's September 2094. My name is Alf, and my life has taken an impressive turn in the last few weeks. So impressive that every morning when I get up I still ask myself whether it's really happened or was it just a dream. Not long ago I worked in an open plan office at the World Institute for Astronautic Space Research and Space Policy and was responsible for ordering the fully automatic cleaning systems that were equipped for spaceships. And now, a few weeks later, I myself am being prepared for a space expedition in which I'm to take part as a cleaner, so to speak, on behalf of the fully automatic cleaning machines that fell victim to a rationalization measure by the Institute. Because of this extraordinary fate, I became a media star and the subject of worldwide discussion. The astronauts, represented by their union, had managed not to have cleanups themselves. This had earned them the accusation of being elitist and aloof, and the media and my own employer had built me up as their opponent. I was supposed to show to keep a spacecraft clean for several months with cheaper cleaning tools, with names like brooms, mops and vacuum cleaners. To do this, I was supposed to take part in the next possible space expedition, the Expedition 11/31. This made me a hero in the public eye around the world, but less so for the astronauts. For them, I was a strikebreaker and a traitor. Stupid was that I would have to leave the world in just under 4 weeks with a selection of around 30 astronauts. At the moment, I'm very well distracted by this, let's say, somewhat uncertain future. I'm in a 50-point preparation session, isolated and closely monitored by 2 minders, Mick and Jim. In the last episode, I was in mortal danger several times in a training center, infuriated trainers, and changed my body shape to such an extent that I was no longer recognized by my household robot. In the penultimate episode, I learned about the planet Gliese 581c, the destination of the space expedition I would be taking part in. It's located in a possibly habitable zone of a neighboring solar system and orbits a so-called red dwarf in the constellation Libra. Actually, good conditions for a CE3, a close encounter of the third kind. However, I already had my CE3 before the start of the expedition. Here, just now, in a consultation room at the Institute for Space Research. Hey, before we start, look, somewhere down here you can subscribe to my channel. That's just a small click for a human, but a giant leap, well, you know. And here is the episode 9, How I Met Old Friends Again. Our schedule left me with 4 weeks left on Earth. 4 weeks that I will remember as the weeks in which the media hype about me reached its peak. I saw my portrait in newspapers, my CV was repeated on several TV channels almost every day, and the discussions about me and my mission continued to grow in intensity. The latter mainly referred to posts on social media. However, a video of a Spanish TV discussion was also circulating online, which had to be stopped due to a fight between the two opponents. It was mostly about a question: is Meyer a strikebreaker and traitor, or does he expose the group of astronauts as elite imposters who use their special position in the society to enforce unjustified special rights through their union? I was no longer able to express myself because I was largely isolated as part of my preparation, which, however, fueled the hype in the media about me. In front of my house, the camp of TV broadcasters and correspondents had gotten bigger and bigger. At times, through traffic on my street had to be rerouted. Instantly, the whole entourage would become hectic when I took just one step into my front yard or when the car that picked me up every day drove up. Now it was forbidden to move around the city alone. It would have been difficult to do so. Wherever I appeared, cameras and reporters immediately surrounded me, and my security guards struggled to guide me through the crowd unscathed. It had been a long time since a participant in a space expedition was so in the public interest. Depending on their goals, space expeditions were newsworthy, but rarely made headlines. I think that the current situation behind the scenes at the Space Institute caused a lot of confusion. While I was in the training camp, the names of all selected crew members for Expedition 11/31 had been published. However, the media was hardly interested in that. Instead, a series by my trainer Tony from the training center appeared in a large daily newspaper, for which he was rumored to have received a fee equivalent to 2 years' salary, and was entitled "How I Turned Meyer into an Astronaut." Understandably, all of this was not in the interests of the Space Institute, and the fact that the media was only interested in me obviously hurt the vanity of my future colleagues. Reports surfaced on social media that selection astronauts even refused to accept me as an additional member of the crew. One of them is said to have promised to take care of all the cleaning work, just so that my participation could have been dispensed with. Given the state of things, that would of course have filled the mood against the astronauts even further. In addition, the Space Institute probably feared that public sentiment would eventually turn against the space program as a whole and its horrendous funding requirements. Discussions that arose in this direction ultimately led to the savings measures that triggered the dilemma in the first place. So my participation finally went through. I didn't find out about any of this at first, and later only heard it in rumors. Mick and Jim did a good job of insulating me from this kind of information. I was busy with my training for 10 hours a day. After the training center, we were still 9 points left unfinished on my 50-point plan. In the last few days, I had been able to do 5 more. However, surprisingly, another point, the 51st, was added. The Space Institute had an idea that would shift public interest in your expedition away from me and more towards the entire crew and their scientific mission. To present this idea, the head of the Space Institute appeared in a major evening news program. It is important to him to emphasize that the expedition to the planet Gliese 581c is a very important scientific mission. He demanded that the fact that this expedition was currently only ever associated with a single person must come to an end. He wants to work to present the team exclusively as one team to the public in the future. He wanted to support these with a large media show modeled on a film premiere shortly before the start of the expedition. The entire crew and their scientific mission should be presented to the entire media world, with shows, interviews, and everything that would be necessary to distribute media interest fairly among all crew members and the focus on the scientific mission of the expedition. The subsequent commercial break unfortunately began with a spot with a cartoon character wearing a spacesuit, and My face stands on a gangway of a spaceship, holds up a bottle of cleaning product and says in the robust voice of a Western hero, "Hey, I don't know what your household robot used to clean your apartment, but I know for sure I'm cleaning the entire universe with this stuff." Sleep out! So that became 51st point on my now 51st point plan, preparing for a big media event show. But first, the 50th point on my 51 point plan had to be completed. My first contact with the entire crew. I was supposed to get to know them and they got to know me. A larger consultation room in the institute and 2 hours from 10 a.m. to 12 were planned for this purpose. The head of the institute would take us one by one, briefly introduce and a few words say about the importance of the expedition. Everything to the exclusion of any uninvolved people. We should be completely among ourselves. I was escorted to the consultation room by Mick and Jim. The two said goodbye to me with a thumbs up hand sign and remained in the hallway area. At times, I found it touching how they both looked after me and accompanied me every step of the way. It's a bit depressing to think that in a few weeks they would send me out into the universe alone with 30 strangers. 30 people who until recently would have preferred to remove me from the crew list. 30 people who felt disadvantaged because of the public attention towards me. 30 people for whom I was a scab and a traitor. Well, I should get to know her now. I entered the consultation room. Most of the others were already sitting inside. I first greeted the head of the institute and then everyone else. "Hello, how are you?" The reaction was sparse. I sat down and looked around. Women and men in roughly equal proportions, most of them between 30 and 40. Only a few visibly older. 9:57 a.m. Only one seat was left, that of the commander. 9:58 a.m. Silence. Tension. The commander was expected. 9:59 a.m. The door opened. There she stood. Commander Harris. The silence broke immediately. She greeted everyone in a friendly manner and everyone greeted them back. The head of the institute stood up, greeted her with a handshake, accompanied her to her seat and began to speak. I wasn't listening. I was preoccupied with the thought that I knew Commander Harris from somewhere. She had reddish hair and was probably my age, and I knew her. But from where? And why did I feel like I remembered her face with more of an angry expression? Suddenly it dawned on me. She had been the commander of a waste fleet freighter on which cleaning robot had gone out of control due to a defect. I mentioned this story in the episode 1. A cleaning robot had mistook the crew for a contaminant that needed to be removed and began taking measures to eliminate it, whereupon the crew fled in the escape capsule. The commander and co-pilot remained in the spaceship and were able to barricade themselves on the bridge. The story ended well but dramatically. The waste freighter had to make an emergency landing and the two had to be rescued by the spaceport's counter-terrorism special unit. But for me, there was an aftermath. An investigation was initiated against me to clarify whether I had observed the necessary quality requirements for spaceships when ordering and purchasing the cleaning machines. The investigative commission came to the conclusion that the problem could have arisen because the programming of the cleaning robots had been left to a new contractor for cost reasons. Since I had chosen the contractor, according to an instruction from my boss to simply award a contract to the cheapest one, I was found guilty. I reported on this in the first episode. In addition, this affair probably contributed significantly to the idea of focusing future savings measures on the automatic cleaning. Now, of all people, Commander Harris was my future boss. Well, admittedly, a close encounter of the third kind, that was a bit of an exaggeration. But my worries about my future on a spaceship bound for a planet some 20 light years away, with a crew that didn't want me and a commander whose life I had put in danger, was not subsided. I didn't let on me. She probably knew exactly how we knew each other, but she didn't let on to. By the way, my job on the spaceship was called Administrative Assistant, and I reported directly to Commander Harris. I later learned that it was because none of the chiefs wanted me in their departments. Oh well. Speaking of departments, I'll give you an overview of the crew as a chart, so that I don't have to bore you with a long list of names and jobs. This is the crew of the expedition 11/31 to the planet Gliese 581c in the constellation Libra. A few days later, I would see all of my future colleagues again. Mick and Jim informed me about the program. There was to be a red carpet, an interview area, a large hall for small talk and shows, and a cold buffet. Half of the invited guests were media representatives, the other half were celebrities, managers, and us. TV channels around the world had live broadcast rights. Evening wear was required. Mick and Jim brought me a back suit, white shirt, and a tie to the office the day before. I didn't have to worry about that. Great. The evening of the show. Even though I had been able to build up enough practice in dealing with media over the last few months, I had a little bit stage fright. The suit was smart and fit, but I wasn't used to clothes like that. Nevertheless, I expected a nice evening. By the afternoon, the media camp in front of my house had already broken up a bit. I could see the opposite side of the street again. Apparently, they had all been relocated to the venue. The show took place in a posh hotel in the center. The protagonists of the evening had been given a target arrival time by the organizers. That was the time at which our cars were supposed to drive up to the red carpet. I only knew my arrival time, but I knew that these times followed a strict protocol that specified an order. From the organizer's point of view, the most important people should drive up last. First the press and the media representatives, then invited guests, celebrities, managers, and so on. Then the crew, and here I should start together with the assistant scientists and engineers. Finally, Commander Harris and the head of the institute was supposed to arrive on the red carpet as the highlight. My driver had it well under control. Our arrival time was exactly right. We pulled up and all hell broke loose. Oh, I had never seen so many cameras in one place, and that was saying something given the developments in my recent past. As we drove up, our car was literally flooded with reporters and photographers. Two were kneeling on our hood with cameras. We didn't manage to open the doors. We would inevitably have crushed the first row of jostling people. A young lady armed with a microphone and pulling a cameraman behind her by his tie knocked violently on the windows of our car. When I finally gave in and opened the window a little, she was no longer able to ask questions because the mass of reporters pressing after her took her breath away. She breathed something incomprehensible, and her careful made-up blue eyes began to turn in different directions. I had to act, so I lowered the car window all the way and pulled her into the car through the window. She lay on top of me half senseless. She had not yet let go of her cameraman's tie, which in turn led to a life-threatening situation for him. That didn't stop him from keeping the camera pointed at me, albeit racing. When I had saved his life too, security forces managed to get to my car and clear an alley to the hotel entrance. My path across the red carpet descended into chaos. The reporters, photographers and cameramen had already broken through the barriers when I arrived. I was permanently surrounded by a bunch of humans. I reached the entrance portal with security forces and media representatives fighting with each other there. I had expected to be able to breathe a little more freely again, as the media should actually have turned their attention to my successors. But this only seemed to happen to a very limited extent. I remained surrounded, which resulted in my surroundings remaining invisible for me for much of the evening. So far, I have not been able to find out who was involved in the event, Nor, what was even more unfortunate, was I able to find a cold buffet. I tried as best I could to answer the questions being shouted at me, which was difficult because the questionnaires were often pushed aside before they had finished their questions. What I didn't notice in the chaos was that my colleagues who arrived after me were basically alone on the red carpet and didn't attract much attention. The host of the show tried to change that by announcing that the nomination certificates would be handed over to the future crew in order to draw attention to the other crew members. They were already on stage with him. What can I say? The success of this announcement was limited. The cluster around me didn't get any smaller. I can only assume the following events, because I was ultimately busy answering questions and securing a modicum of room for survival in the middle of the even tightening ring of media people and security forces. Apparently, after failing to draw media attention to a ceremony on stage, an attempt was made to shift into the center of the attention, to me. So they tried to get the other crew members through the siege ring to me. Commander Harris had apparently set a good example. I noticed her when her head appeared near the ground between the legs of several reporters fighting each other. When I pulled her out, the top half of her quite remarkable evening dress and part of the bottom half was caught between the reporters' legs. "Commander Harris!" I asked because I really didn't know and was really worried. "What are you doing here?" The look that hit me could have killed me. There was no time for further conversation because more heads between reporter legs that had to be rescued. Executive Chief John Jones, Scientific Director Robert James, and the pilots Leah Taylor and Bernd Smith, all similarly buttered as Commander Harris, which now caught the attention of the media. A storm of flashbulbs began. One can imagine the images that appeared in the media the next day, filling front pages and dominating TV news. These were the pictures of the crew of Space Expedition 11/31 that went around the world. So, I'm back home now and need some more sleep. I'm expected at the spaceport in 3 days and it starts in 5 days. I hope you have you there again. So until then, bye and good night.